Well, joining me now on our news panel are Michael Montgomery, reporter for KQED News and the Center for Investigative Reporting; Rachel Gordon, City Hall reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle; Carla Marinucci, political writer, also with the Chronicle. Carla, you were at the town hall meeting in Oakland where this all took place. Congresswoman Barbara Lee, Honda, and no longer Speaker, Minority Leader Pelosi were all there. What's your impression of what went on and what was the tone of it?
You know, it was very dramatic, Belva. I have to say, you had about 900 people show up, and there's so much media coverage of the Tea Party movement on the other side of the aisle, the anger there about deficits and debt. I think we've been remiss in covering this faction of anger that's out there in the public. It was very clear, it was very on display that night in Oakland. Calls from the audience, chants telling Pelosi and Lee and Congressman Honda to tax the rich. At some point, calling them sellouts on the issue of the debt agreement. They were talking about ending the war. I mean, people lined up, and we heard story after story of frustrated people who wanted to work, who want jobs, and are very, very concerned about what is going to happen here. I think when we're looking at this kind of anger out there, you know, I think the presidential race hinges on this issue. President Obama is about to unveil his jobs plan in September, and I think a lot is riding on it for both the Democrats and the Republicans here.
Carla, we've seen the brilliance of Republicans in terms of staying on message, whether it's going to be Maine or California or Texas or Minnesota. It's the same message, same time of the day, day after day after day.
Right.
The Democrats have not been as good at doing that, even though that anger's there. We've known what the positions have been by the progressive faction, the more liberal. Do you think there's going to be any change that they can now say, okay, we have the people behind us on this, and then they could do the message, or are they just going to?
It was interesting because Pelosi at this meeting, you know, sort of gave a message out there. This super committee on deficit reduction is about to begin meeting. And there are some members of that committee on the Republican side, Tea Party members, who are absolutely against any kind of proposals, as Honda talked about, which is creating public sector jobs, anything that's perceived as stimulus spending. And that this is going to be a battle, I think, like we've never seen. She said there is no magic formula. She's right, Pelosi but she said we all have to come to some kind of conclusion here, some kind of agreement. It doesn't look like it's happening more and more. That when you look at the rhetoric on the presidential race, when you look at the rhetoric, all the different congressional races, they're all on right now having meetings at town hall meetings in their own districts. This is going to be the issue, and I think so much is at stake for President Obama with this jobs plan coming up, and we're going to start seeing Republican presidential candidates hitting California. And at this point, you're right, on the Democratic side, on the progressive side, particularly on that end of the party's spectrum, there are people who are saying it is time to end the wars, tax the rich, go after the corporations.
So where does Obama land on this? Does he going to go to the middle again, or is he going to go to the progressives?
That is the question, Rachel. You know, and particularly when you're talking about taxing, nobody wants to talk about raising taxes, but even Warren Buffett this week raised that and got a tremendous amount of publicity.
Well, we're hearing it at least from the local progressive Democrats on this issue.
Right.
Well, Rachel Gordon, this week hackers broke in and took confidential information from BART yet again, some personal information about their officers. Where is this whole problem going?
Right, so this whole issue is really a debate at this point, between free speech and public safety, and that's how BART is casting it. We have to look back a little bit of what happened. It was last week when BART, which is a regional rail service, 350,000 boardings a day, 4 counties, a lot of people rely on that. BART decided, because there was an anticipated protest, to shut off cell phone service, texting ability in the downtown stations in San Francisco. They said this is a way that protesters organize, is to go and say, we're here, go to this way to get people moving. We've seen that happening not just here, but across the world, really, to get protesters out there. BART said they did it preemptively because they wanted to stop disruption of trains and stop any possible violence or public safety issues if there are a lot of protesters protesters in these very narrow stations, people could get hurt on a train. The hackers collective called Anonymous then said, you can't do that. This is a First Amendment issue. We're going to show you, more or less, they said. So they went into 2 websites, one, a BART marketing website, and published the names and addresses, personal information about a number of the members of the public who have signed up for that program, and also to the BART Police Union website, and put home addresses of some police officers out there as well. And they aren't planning to stop anytime soon necessarily. There has been a lot of public outrage about this kind of all over the place. One, don't cut off our cell phone service. It's become so ubiquitous. We really count on it. The other hand, BART's saying we want to make sure people can get home safely.
Okay, but doesn't the hackers group Anonymous undermine their cause very dramatically when they do things that hurt working people, putting out their private information, particularly both for the police and the general public? I mean, that's a serious issue for working people.
Right, a lot of people are angry about that. It's also a way to get public attention. It seems anytime there's civil disobedience, one of the ideas is to inconvenience regular people, whether you're sitting in the road at Livermore Labs to stop the nuclear bomb being made there or being designed there. There's always going to be a public inconvenience. Not only did it happen with the protests, with the websites being hacked into, but we also saw this past Monday when there was a protest that was called by Anonymous through the social media networks. BART decided because of that to shut down 4 downtown San Francisco stations. I was covering that protest, and there are a number of people, whether they were visitors or just folks just trying to get home, the evening commute, who couldn't go and get BART, and they were trying to figure out what to do. There's a lot of disruption. They're saying, some of the people are going, hey, look, you know, we can understand the cause if you're angry about something, but why don't you go and protest at BART headquarters instead of, as you're saying, protesting working people just trying to get home.
Right, exactly. I mean,
well, question you mean? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, no, I mean, the initial security threat, how significant was it? I mean, we're balancing, you know, freedom of speech and public safety. What was your assessment?
Well, if anyone's been into a BART station during the morning or evening commutes, there's not a heck of a lot of room to maneuver there. People are lined up. It is scary when a train comes whizzing into the station. If there's a protest there and there are police and media there, you're going to get thrown onto the tracks by mistake somehow. So there was that real concern. There's also a protest earlier at the BART stations where people were disrupting service, climbing on top of the trains. Now, this wasn't just, people weren't just protesting for the sake of protesting. We should say really what prompted this. And on July 3rd, there was a shooting, a BART police shooting of a homeless man in the Civic Center station. He was said to be wielding a knife. BART has had problems before with police shootings. We know it was on New Year's Day a couple of years ago when an unarmed man was shot on a BART platform. So there was a lot of anger still bubbling about that. So it was the latest shooting, the July 3rd shooting, that prompted these protests. So first it was about the police activity, then it became about free speech rights. Now BART is going to have a public hearing on the whole cell phone issue this coming week, next week, to talk about it. The BART board members have weighed in on different sides. Some say it was a good thing to do for public safety. Some say, wait a minute. You guys, management, did this decision by yourself without the policymakers, the elected BART board. So now the public's going to get a right to weigh in as well.
And people know about this all over the world.
Yeah, Facebook, Twitter, email accounts, cell phone texts, it's everywhere.
Well, Michael Montgomery, you were one of 7 members of the media that was allowed to tour the high security wing of Pelican Bay Prison this last week. Tell us what you found.
Well, I've been there before, and what we saw is a fairly bleak place, a windowless unit, security housing units, where the state houses what they deem are some of the most dangerous inmates. Most of the men in there, it's 95%, have alleged ties to prison gangs, either as leaders or as associates. It's not a pretty place. I mean, you can't dress it up and make it look pleasant, but you do see inmates communicating with each other. Their cells are lined up next to each other so they can talk to each other. In some cases, they are bunked together. But I think the big news this week, when the hunger strike was over in July, the Department of Corrections was talking about considering or studying some of these controversial policies. This week, the department moved forward and said they're actually going to be making changes, substantive changes. Now, some of those might need buy-in from the legislature or other folks, but it does look like the department is moving forward to tackle some of these more controversial elements, the main one being why and how inmates are sent into these units, and the length of time they spend in these isolation areas.
Michael, let me just play devil's advocate here. You know, the charge was that this prison area is so isolated and almost inhumane conditions. But how tough could it be if these inmates were able to organize a hunger strike among each other? Doesn't that suggest that it really was, maybe it's not as isolated as they?
Well, it's not a pleasant place. I mean, it's true that the inmates aren't completely isolated. It's not, you know, what you would think of as solitary confinement. I think to flip that around, the inmates are quite emboldened by what they were able to accomplish, and that is that this hunger strike started in this isolation areas and spread to other prisons. So I think it was quite an accomplishment. The other thing is that they got different inmates from different racial and ethnic backgrounds and different gang backgrounds to come together, and I think that motivated the department to focus on an issue that they were thinking about, but to really spend some time looking at the policies, and that's what they're doing right now.
Michael, why did they invite the media out to Pelican Bay? What was the reason for that you could go and see what was happening there? Was the public relations saying this really isn't that bad, or were people demanding we want to
No,
get a
the
first-hand
department
look?
was not allowing the media in during the hunger strike. So this was to address that, and I think they did want to try to show that some of these inmates are very dangerous, some of these gang members.
Okay. Well, thank you, Michael, for following up on this story, because you've been covering it for your organization as well as this program, so thank you.